Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. Let's just give this a couple of minutes before we get started. I know it's Friday and people might be trying to get away from their work laptop. I'd like to show them patience, and I would appreciate that. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I am so excited. This is the first of our weekly sessions on mindfulness, and I'm so grateful and express my gratitude for everyone who has taken the time this Friday afternoon to step away from the many things that we are doing or trying to finish up for the week to be here. Just some reminders in terms of this being a webinar format. So that means that there's a chat open for you to position any questions, to or provide responses as and when they are requested. But I would ask that we keep other type of chatter to a minimum so that we can stay focused on the task at hand. As well, because it's an experiential session where we just want to end this week with some calmness and clarity for everyone, maybe decompress a little bit. So therefore, I ask that you know that your camera is not on, but just to try to avoid this kind of distraction in terms of the chat. I hope you've had a chance to prepare your space as had been requested in the email. It's not too late. So if you're glaring at multiple tabs on your laptop, I ask that you can shut those down, maybe turn your phone on silent and upside down so it's not flashing at you. Because I promise you that all of these things will really help to create one of the best experiences you've had this week. I'd like to start this session off to say that this is, as I said, it could be an hour, it could be a little less than an hour, but I felt that a Friday afternoon is a time when we are able to step away from work safely. And also that we're starting to think about transitioning into the weekend. And so, you know, this time was really carefully placed, and I'm really looking forward to starting this journey with you on a weekly basis. And everything that I do impart in the way of knowledge and everything that I do learn from this session as well, be stuff that we will carry into the weekend. And hopefully you will even reach out to me after and say, hey, I was thinking about what you said, and what about this and this? So we can start that conversation. I have this welcoming message because it really is a place in which I like to learn in. And so I honor every one of you in this way. I honor the place in you in which the entire universe currently dwells. We are part of such a much bigger entity than ourselves. We are a morsel of energy outside of that. But together and collectively, we create this powerful energy. So let's acknowledge that we are truly all acting together in everything that we do in these sessions, that there is collective power in that. I want to honor the place in you, which is made of pure love, truth, light, and of peace. And this is the energy I would like to invite into these sessions every time we meet, that we may grow and be brilliant together. And then when you are in that place that I describe, that I too will be there, and together we will learn. Some of you don't actually know me or know of Envia very well. I'm very grateful that you've taken a chance to even attend this. I want to, in a nutshell, share the story of the person who's going to be talking to you each week. And I do hope that you join us regularly because it's going to be an amazing journey together, and maybe even challenging at stages, but definitely in a very supportive setting. Anvaya was set up with a mission in mind, and my mission was really about others learning how the practice of mindfulness was spurring self-responsibility, self-leadership, focus, clarity, and composure, and social intelligence. And this comes from a very personal journey of my own over the last 2 decades as I cultivated many different paths in my life. For example, that I have been in the corporate sector for 30 years now, and in 8 different industries. And I have worked and served many leaders and many teams in that duration. And that journey of growth became better and better and stronger. And I was able to navigate better and better because these were the qualities that I saw in myself as I worked through a parallel practice of my own, which was in the mindfulness space. I'm also a mother to 3 children, 2 of which are my stepdaughters, who I gratefully accepted into my life at the age of 6 and 10 when I got married. And today they are beautiful young women who are in their 20s. And I then have a 13-year-old son who continues to keep me very active and interested. Many other paths, I tend to be an extremely active person in my life. So I have loved to explore communities and physical activities. My latest being the fact that in my late 40s, I began to climb mountains, and I have this zest for always trying new things. So what I observed in myself is that my mindfulness practice, which I began to build slowly and gradually some 20 years ago, really led me into places where I was dropping the fear voice in me. I was starting to communicate more and more and think in a far more inspired state all the time. And so I brought Anvaya to life because I felt that there were qualities that people really need today or are looking for in terms of cultivating as part of their human development, and that maybe people didn't really understand how it is that practice, as we call it, that we are performing at some point during our day or in our lives is or is not serving us to be better human beings, more effective human beings, more engaged and confident human beings. So these 4 were the pillars, the end result that I would like to see with all of the people that work with me as part of Anvaya and with all of the people that we interact with in community. One of the challenges I had, which I can share with you, that really led me also to come to this space, is the fact that I was practicing various types of mindfulness techniques. And I was on the search. I've been very curious. I've explored many different avenues in this space over the last 20 years, including, just becoming a yoga teacher and saying, what is this going to do in my mindset? Or challenging myself always to do new things. And I think the thing that I identified for myself is that there are many sources, even now on our cell phones. For example, you can get onto an app and you can be mindful. You can listen to something that might calm you down. But what I hadn't found was how to bring that practice into every interaction, every deed of the day, every decision that I had to make, every thought that was going through my mind that I wanted to express through my mouth, but I realized that there needed to be a response and not reactivity. So I would say that in that way, I have found that our unique life journeys really serve to inform us as to whether a mindfulness practice really does serve us or not. I'd ask that our participants now participate in this conversation. And what I'm going to do is position some questions to you, which I would love if you could go on the chat and share your thoughts on this. And these are very simple questions, but just know that all of your responses are helping other people say, hey, I'm not alone, or yeah, I relate to that, or no, this doesn't even happen for me, but this is how it shows up. So it's no secret that we are all living in a world post the pandemic. I don't know if it's really over or not yet, but here we go. We're living in a society right now where stress factors are playing a much louder voice or having a much larger impact for those of us who work remotely, for those of us who are still contending with children who are trying to get out of the social distancing space, and all the sicknesses that are going around. There's a number of triggers, and I'd just like to ask this question now. How do you recognize your stressors or triggers of stress? How does it show up for you on a daily basis? What do you notice of yourself? If you could share some thoughts here, that would be really helpful. So please feel free to use the chat. Seems we're not very open to sharing. Unrealistic expectations, too many demands on my time, not sleeping well. Thank you for sharing that, Hitesh. Anger, feeling unproductive, not getting stuff done as much as you'd like to get done. Emotional eating, welcome to my gang. Like a full day of emotional eating, shouting, agitation. The increasing expectations in a remote working environment. People telling me to do stuff I don't want to do. And so I will ask again, some of these are emotional responses that we're having to stressors. And I know somebody just shared, that I'm having some physical symptoms like I'm not sleeping. I will share with you, for example, earlier, before I got a handle over it, I found myself shaking. And before we get to the stage of shaking, there's a lot of precursors to starting to shake when your hands are starting to shake. And so there were many stages that we don't recognize before getting to a certain point. For me, the insomnia or the lack of sleep would start, or having very restless sleep, and then it kind of carrying on into the next day. And then I'm not all there because I'm tired. You're fuzzy, you're not focused. All of these things would happen. And then one day I woke up because I realized that I was shaking. And there were a number of, reasons why that might be happening at any one particular stage in my life. But a sense of awareness and being extremely attuned to how things are changing from one moment to another for yourself is definitely something that we must pay close attention to. So I really thank you all for weighing in there. Overthinking, yes, for us warriors. The worry warts, definitely. Overthinking, analyzing too much. Others go very quiet when they're stressed. These are the people I really worry about, right? They aren't really expressing what's going on with them. They're just kind of internalizing a lot of it and putting out a tough exterior. My favorite line I used to get from a lot of people, you can't hurt steel. And I'd keep getting that until I had to break through a few layers and barriers with them so that they felt safe enough to say, yeah, I actually am feeling stressed. As leaders, it's really important for us that we recognize that our team members or even people in our family may not actually be acknowledging what is happening to them when they're stressed. Let's move to the next question. If you could share with me, are there things that you do regularly? So it's not things you do once in a while, maybe once every 2 weeks, but regularly you do to decompress that have worked for you so that you feel more stabilized in times of anxiety and stress. For me, I can share right now, as I shared before, physical activity was inbred in me since I was a little girl. And little did I know that, while my mother pushed me from the age of 6 to 16 to nonstop classical dance classes that at some point I'm sure I disliked even, but she kept made me going. I didn't realize that in my adult life, this is what was going to actually help me manage my stress. So any kind of physical activity that you do regularly I'd like to hear about. Praying, excellent. Praying and visualizing sunny days. Hitesh, we're not getting too many of those. If you're living in Toronto with me, have you noticed how there's much less sunlight these days in the winter? Yoga and nature walks, beautiful. Those of you joining us from Florida, let me just tell you how inspired I am that you can take your nature walks for as long as you like right now. I go and play with my 4-year-olds. And it brings back my focus. How beautiful is this? The idea of bringing out our inner child. What better way than to serve our children in play? Because those, as I was just telling another mother yesterday, is what our children will remember most of us, is how we played. That's in their DNA, how much we played. I love that. I remind myself of my goals. Excellent. So when you're feeling stressed, focusing on the bigger picture, on what you really set out to do, helps to redirect your thoughts into a calmer space. On the beach, listening to classical music, focusing on what I value, what inspires me most. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. In a bit, we're going to talk about the importance of having a regular practice, and what we might think is not really mindfulness, truly, in fact, is a way in which we practice. So one of the reasons I wanted to take this up today is because as we go through this journey every week, I would like all of us to share a common understanding of what this word is. It's not a new word. It's almost everywhere nowadays, maybe more so than ever. And it's really important that we have dispelled some of the myths of what mindfulness is and accepted and embraced fully and understood what the meaning of this word is. And as we learn that, it is also my sincere hope that you too will go out and share that with others, because there are some pretty big misconceptions about what this word really means. If you have some thoughts, I would love if you could share with me, what is mindfulness to you? And please don't be shy. It doesn't have to be perfect language or completely well thought out sentences. What does mindfulness, when you think about that word, what does it mean to you? How does it serve you? What does it look like? To be in the present moment, Rashmi. Thank you. It means calmly moving in the direction of my highest priority activities. Just feeling breath, something we do from birth so unconsciously, that which actually gives us life, that which sustains us through all of our situations, that which is so existential. And yet we forget its power. So, such a beautiful thought. It means feeling the breath. To be considerate, behavioral. Yes, how are we showing our mindfulness? There are many traits that we show when we're being mindful. Mindfulness is something that nourishes every part of me. Almost feels like an energy when you word it that way. You know, we are energy beings. Every gene of ours contains a certain voltage of energy. And together, if we count all of the genes in our body, we are trillions of volts of energy. And it's worth understanding how that plays a part in how we feel that energy in every part of our being. Feeling completely synchronized with my most important, would I say, my highest self, my elevated state. Those are some great answers. So let's just dive a little bit into what mindfulness is from different angles. One of the things I want to clear up here is that mindfulness is not meditation. There's a talk on social media I did very early on back in the fall last year. It was really important that I thought, if I'm going to actually educate others on how to embrace this fully, and we'll talk about what does fully really mean, what does it look like? One of the things we got to get off the table is this idea that it's the same as meditation. There are many tools, there are many roadways, there's many bridges, there's a lot of techniques that you can leverage to be mindful. Meditation is one of those techniques. And within that sphere, there are many different types of meditation. There are moving meditations, there are sedentary meditations, there's music, there's guided meditations. So there's different types of meditations, but that box of meditations is just one of many other boxes that put together develop a practice. The second is that there is some notion, and I think this comes from the history of those of us who come from the East, or those of us who've grown up in the Western world, that have looked at mindfulness as being a religious practice, something that maybe stems from all of our religious institutions, be it a temple or a mosque or a church, and that this idea actually stems from one of those places or philosophies. And the truth of the matter is, as we go through this, we're going to learn that this, in fact, is something very universal, regardless of what our religious background is. We may have different tool sets that cultivate mindfulness. As I said, there are many boxes and ways to get there. But the idea that it is attached to any one particular religion is also false. And one more thing, mindfulness is not to be viewed as it's one more thing I have to do in the day. Our physical practice, got to get to my gym, got to get to my class, got to get to my workplace, got to pick up my kids, got to eat, got to do this. Those are all the things we do. When you've developed a mindfulness practice, it basically becomes a way that you live in the moment every single breath that you take. And so being able to carry that state with you doesn't become one more thing, it just becomes innate. And so as we've looked at what it is not, let's talk about what it truly is. It's a teachable cognitive skill. And what do we mean by that? We have many different parts of our brain. If you are very close to neuroscience or interested in neuroscience, you will know that our brain has many different parts, and those different parts, conduct our capabilities as humans, as in terms of our emotions, in terms of our logic, how well we leverage each part of our brain, and awareness of that also needs to be there. So mindfulness is actually a cognitive skill that helps us build a self-awareness of our full mind. And what do I mean by that? Different situations demand that we leverage our emotional intelligence, our social intelligence, our IQ. And if we're always operating from one part of our brain because that's our strength, or that is just the muscle that we develop the most, oftentimes we're not able to exercise other powerful parts of our brain. And so the idea is that we have a full brain, a whole plethora of rich tools to draw from. But if we are not aware of all of those capabilities, then we are not able to call in what might make our responses even more powerful and impactful. The second is that when we have that awareness, then we're able to decide what our responses should be, and we're able to prioritize them. So let me give you a little bit of color around this. Generally, there are many parts of the brain, but there are three main parts of our brain. And the one in the back, which is a small part, is called the basal ganglia. And this part actually controls the threat that we perceive around us. It's a very animalistic part of the brain that all animals also have, right? And so it is the one that looks at the exterior with fear, and it manages that. The second part is called the limbic system, and the limbic system works with the basal ganglia. And the limbic system is where our fight or flight responses come from. And this is the part where all our emotions also stem from. So together with the basal ganglia, we are able to do what? We're able to survive. We're able to protect ourselves. And so these two parts are the parts where a lot of our emotional reactions come from, be they positive or negative. But there's a third part, and that is the front of the brain, and it is called the neocortex. And this part is where a lot of our inspirational thinking comes from. This is the part that creates, this is the part that finds solutions, this is the part that seeks to adapt gracefully through changes. And so as we go through our lives, it's really important that we understand that our responses are very much guided and chosen by which part of our brain we choose to draw from, or what we habitually choose to draw from. And this part is about how we manage our judgment, our bias, our past patterns, or anything that we left behind that we don't really need to bring into our present moment. The third is mindfulness is a cognitive skill that helps us respond differently with self-responsibility. The whole idea that you are responsible for everything that has gotten you to where you are today. Just absorbing that and accepting it, that I have the ability to respond, response and ability, as opposed to the burdened version of what responsibility means. But self-responsibility, saying, you know what, I call back the power to respond, which then lends us to build self-leadership before we lead others. And we start to get super clear about what we care about, what we don't care about. When we start to engage in that kind of mindfulness practice, there comes the composure and the collectiveness and the sense of calm. So there's actually a way to learn these things. And now you can see why it's not just something we do on the mat where we close our eyes and almost feels like escaping from reality and what is going on. It is something that's actually walking within us, or as a friend with us all the time, navigating with us. And it's not anything new. Ellen Langer is a well-known researcher in the space, and she's many things actually. She's a musician, she's an artist, she's a researcher, psychologist, and she put together this amazing book on mindfulness for the Harvard Business Review. And in it, when asked in very plain terms, what is mindfulness? Because this was geared towards those of us who are working and experiencing challenges in the workplace. She really dumbs this down over 40 years of research. Her plain definition of mindfulness is, it is the process of noticing new things. Sounds so basic. But if I'm not continually noticing new things, it means that things are just passing me by. And I'm not in a constant state of observation. And so when asked more what this looks like, she relates some of the examples of studies that she conducted with many other people in these organizations, such as 3M, where she did many studies with people at 3M around the products that they had. And so their ability to see new solutions when they were not burdened with the way that things are always done. At 3M, she had a breakthrough because they had a product that wasn't doing what it was intended to do. And so what they did is they created these two teams, and they told one team, go figure out what's wrong with this product because it's not meeting what it was supposed to do. It's not doing what it was supposed to do. But the other team, they were just told, here's the product. What do you think we can do with it? And it turned out that that one other thing that they had come up with, the second team actually came up with a very profitable idea as to what could be done. So when we're not burdened with what something was supposed to look like or what somebody was supposed to behave a certain way, we start to see new avenues. The second, and when we start to see those avenues, then we focus on what I call the neocortex, because then we become focused on working with the front of our brain. The second is that we start to execute and perform better. When we're not burdened with what every other person is doing. And the way she did this is she tested people in well-known orchestras. People in orchestras are very well paid. If you work for or you play for some of the largest orchestras in the world, these are very accomplished, well-paid people. And when they are told to keep playing, they were some of the most bored people, as she found out, because they were playing the same thing over and over and over again all the time. But when she took a subset of them away and asked them to listen to a tune and play it the way that played a bit differently, that's all she told them to do. Everyone in that orchestra took one aspect of what they were listening to and played it differently. And what came together was a completely different symphony. So our ability to perform is enhanced when we are noticing what is new, what can I do that's new? What is happening around me that can change? Thirdly, our ability to control our judgment response, super important. This was actually one of the first reasons why some 15, 20 years ago, a company like IBM actually appointed its first chief mindfulness officer. At the time, their organizational culture was really struggling with a lot of contention with its leadership teams. The culture was very judgmental. People weren't feeling like anybody cared about them. And so they were the first, if not the second, SAP might have been the first, where they not only appointed a C-suite executive around this space, but they have mindfulness development programs alive and well in their culture long before COVID. And it has served them well. And what that has done is it's changed the culture and really lowered the voice of judgment and the practice of letting judgment lead in employee engagement. The last observation that I'll share with you is that what she observed is that people in all walks of life, whether they were CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, whether they were well-known artists, whether they were well-known, anybody who was at the top of their game, so many of them that had so much charisma, all had a mental practice of some sort. These are noteworthy observations when you think about what is mindfulness. And I hope that I've expanded your understanding of what this is and what it is not. When we work together week after week, we will be drawing on some of this as our foundation. So why do this now? Well, I've given you some compelling reasons just now. But why do you think today, more so than ever, if you look around you at your friends, if you look at your family, what do you observe that you feel that more and more people need to learn this now? If you can share some of that in terms of your thoughts on that, that would be amazing. What are you observing everywhere as we come out of the pandemic, or what are you observing in your workplaces more and more? Unless we all live in very perfect situations and everything's under control, tell me what you're observing in the world around you. Hitesh, people are more stressed and more judgmental. Just what we didn't need. More judgment. I feel as a race, are we actually evolving or not? It is a perception here, and I do share that perception. I'll share with you more and more that people are saying this line, and I did a whole video on this, the mandate of having friendship with purpose, is that people are like, afterwards, like, the social distancing has made me understand who my friends are. And now I've really drawn a box around who I associate with. And I'm really careful about the energy that I let into my space. And while all that sounds great for self-preservation, I think as a race, we've actually built bigger walls. And thus we are becoming more judgmental, I feel, as a race. I see here more pressure and more stress around me. Here's an interesting one. Media is influencing people even more and making it look much worse than it really is as well, which, sad to say, may not be anything new. That is true. You see more people frustrated. So good. Yes. More people just in the way they enter a room, how they choose their words right off the bat, sound frustrated. They may not be, but their tones are conveying something quite different. I'm amazed at how many of you have joined us today, by the way. I am floored and so humble, so humble at what I see here. Thank you so much. Here's an interesting one. People have a false understanding of reality because they're influenced by media. Yeah, so if you're feeling more depressed watching the news every day, you're not alone. I actually shield myself from a lot of these things, as opposed to shielding myself from different kinds of people saying they're kind of not in my happy space. I tend to shield myself from a lot of the media around me because that's the stuff I don't really need. And it's preventing me from extending myself to other people. The more me attitude. Excellent. Good observation. Seeing more people going through the day with agitation and anxiety. Would like to see people go through their days with less of that for sure, as different new situations arise. We're going to talk about that. New situations arising all the time, some in your control, some not in your control. So, what do you have control over? Here's another one. People live in 30-second bites of information. It's hard to focus. A good practice actually serves us to improve our focus. But these days, getting so much social media platforms we're on, it's click, 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 switch screen, switch screen. I think I was working, what was I working on? Oh, so there's somebody's WhatsApp message, right? The brain has really stressed out from all of this. And are we doing any one thing to the best of our ability anymore is something we ought to question. So these are amazing responses. Thank you. Why build this practice now? Some of the reasons that you've outlined here are very powerful. We can't be going through our lives in this way. And so some of us have started on this journey. Some of us have never embarked on the journey. Some of us are kind of playing with it, but not really sure how it's actually propelling our success. So before I jump into how it propels success, let's look at why it's so important with all the reasons you have just outlined for me. Is that right now, I think you can all agree that there is a mental health crisis. And every single one of us, in some way or the other, has been affected by some kind of mental health. Even anxiety in itself is a mental health concern. And so people often ask, well, how do I know if I'm mentally healthy? What am I supposed to look for? And the Canadian Mental Health Association has these three indicators that tell you and should tell you whether or not you're feeling mentally healthy. If you feel that your capacity to feel well, what does that mean? Feeling well is that you're able to enjoy happy moments and you're able to engage in everything that inspires you. You're able to get up and do this and participate in that and talk to anyone you want to, that things that inspire you and motivate you and you're able to move through your days like that is a good indicator that you're feeling well. A second indicator is our ability to cope with reasonable challenges. And so let's just talk about, somebody just put out here, there's so many things going on around us and stuff's never static. That's life, right? If we're expecting things to stay stable, wait till AI gets here again and again and again in its many forms. So it's going to continue. In fact, I think the pace is just going to pick up. So our ability to cope with those things is in our control. So we can know that I'm mentally healthy when all of those things that are changing around you, you are able to continually respond to, digest, comprehend, and then cope. And cope is sometimes a very iffy word. It's not one that I like to. It's to be able to respond without it really affecting us inside for too long. It can temporarily, that's human, but our ability to recognize that it is actually affecting us and our ability to respond, to change that is up to us. And then finally, if we have interests and goals, how many of us left those back in university somewhere, right? I always say university killed my creativity in some respect. and our schooling systems that we might have come from. If you're like me and I came from the British schooling system, let me tell you, there was no room for creativity there. And so had it not been me lucky that my parents pushed me into all kinds of activities and held me accountable for that discipline, I probably would have lost sight of what inspires me. And so our ability as adults, now as parents, people in our 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, may never end, our ability to continually explore our interests and our goals and then bring that back into our community is a good indicator of our mental health. I ask that you keep these in front of you. If you're ever feeling what you're feeling and you don't recognize, I'm very quick to say on an odd day when I get up and say, kind of feeling depressed right now. Note to self, I am feeling this way. What do we need to change? There are 4 things that mindfulness does. So how does it work? What is it doing in our brain? 4 things. It can guide our self-awareness, meaning that it can invoke our own ability to observe ourselves. With all the stimulants around us, we are so externally focused, it's becoming harder and harder to call on the power of self-awareness and self-observation all the time. What you feel in your meditation or in your moving meditation or wherever you feel calm, if you can observe that as you talk to somebody, as you try to solve a problem, as our team starts to blow up in a meeting room, our ability to self-observe is what mindfulness serves us with. Number 2, it expands our perception. What does that mean? That means that all of us grew up with a certain reality. People who taught us how to live, what we care about, what we don't care about, what we are for a living. Everybody around us and everything around us created our story. I call it our story, my story. And that becomes our reality. But no one really, from a young age, taught us, hey, that's your reality. There's a much bigger reality. And here's how you work with that. And here's how that's going to make you feel less stressed. Mindfulness helps us expand our perception and informs us of many other things that could be going on that allows us to choose responses other than reacting, frustration, anger, impatience, because all we see is what we want in our little story. Number 3, it allows us to accept and self-regulate. So these 2 go together. I have a greater perception. That's great. And as I see a bigger and bigger perception of a reality that's going on, and I see all the other stories that are going on around me for other people, at least now I know they're there. As I take a deep breath, I can actually accept that I am not the only person in a predicament. I don't know what everybody else's predicament, but if they're shouting at me right now, they obviously are coming from a place of a certain reality of their space. If I look at it, I'm aware of it, then I can accept it. But if I am not even allowing myself to break those walls and perceive differently, I definitely cannot accept. And if I cannot accept, then I cannot self-regulate. I cannot choose my response. And the more we do this, what I call starts to happen is something called healthy detachment. The ability to push away from all of the stories and be able to look at a bigger reality, which is very calming, by the way, because then you're not invested in your own head. Somebody has this beautiful line that says, the map is not the terrain. There's this part, which is the terrain, but the map is much bigger. And finally, interaction and impact. It will change who you are, how you interact, your decisions and your actions, what energy you put out, and the impact you will have on your children, on your family, on your friends, and everyone around you. So I've said a lot of things today. Thank you for your patience. I felt that today was one day we really want to take some of this off the table. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take this up. I want you to know that we will in some way be coming back to some of this. And I gave you a lot of information around, definitions and what this is and what this is not. We will be exploring more and more of this as the weeks come by. And what we will look to do is we will look to learn techniques that help us step into the space of effective mindfulness. I have a question here. What can I do today to start a mindful practice? That's a really good question. I'm about to lead you through a meditation, and it's a guided meditation. And I think it's going to answer your question. If you would just hang on for a sec, I promise I'll get to that. Convey was created on the premise that our practice must serve us. It was also set up on the premise that our individual paths in life, our DNA, the way that we are made up, the energy that we have had put into us to be who we are today, does not necessarily need to be the energy that spurs our future direction. And so this is why I created this organization and the practices and the programs therein. And I'm really glad that you've joined us today to be part of that movement, as I call it, because I would like to see more and more people start to step into this space. So in the next session, what are we doing next week? We're going to be learning some basic breathwork techniques. And these breathwork techniques that I've been practicing for 2 decades almost and really perfecting, but comes from various tool sets that I will share with you. And it changes the way we react or respond to external triggers, something as simple as your breath. So breath work is a very big box, and I'll start with some very basic stuff and we will build on that. Can I take any quick questions in the chat before we move to meditation? Anyone have questions? How about feedback? What was a good takeaway for you from this session? What was one thing that stood out for you that you felt, it was worth coming to this session? I learned this. I'd love to hear that as well. Question, is this every week? Yes, this is a weekly series. We will be doing this Fridays 3 to 4 every Friday. And it is, yes, it is recorded. And yes, it will be on my website. Anyone? Let's hear what really jumped out at you, or did I just put you to sleep? Okay. Feedback to yourselves, to myself, and to others on this call is super important for these sessions to be as useful and resourceful. So I do welcome whenever there's this one key takeaway that you might have gotten that you felt that's something new I learned. I would love to hear that, because if you might have picked on it, others may not have known it either. Thank you for sharing. I enjoyed the pace at which you presented. Thank you. That's really good feedback. This being my first one, I'm very grateful for that feedback. Takeaway, I am not alone. You are never alone. That's one of the things I've learned through mindfulness practice. I'm fully supported by this universe in everything I do. I don't feel alone very much. So now I'm going to ask you to either, if you're seated in a comfortable place that you want to take this meditation with me, great. If you've chosen, because you habitually sit on the floor when you do something like this, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to give you an opportunity to get situated, and we will be finishing promptly by 4 o'clock today. I thank you very much. And when we are done, I will be ending this session, so you may stay in that happy place for however long you wish. I have some more people sharing, hearing out other people's point of view. Yes, being able to drop our judgment voices so that we can actually listen, what I call actively. right? We can't listen actively if we can't put our guard down with all the voices that we grow up with. Another key takeaway, mindfulness is different from meditation. So different. Great visuals. I didn't get a chance to tell you about my visuals. I don't know if you guys noticed, but every one of these slides had a read. Did you notice that? Who noticed that? Just say yes. I noticed that. These are different types of reads. And if you'd like to share with me, what is it about reads that we all can learn from? What is it? I'm very mesmerized by reads all over the place. So the read is this. How about that? So the visuals. When the mighty wind blows, the great oak falls, never to stand again. Yet the reed bends and bows and stands tall when the calm air returns. Be the reed. If there's one thing you take away and you sit in mindfulness today, think about the reed. Okay, so lecture over. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to assume you all are seated where you are. I will ask you to close your eyes as you start to experience a guided meditation. And I would like to express my gratitude one more time before we close the session to say thank you so much for ending your week with me and starting your weekend with me. And do start it off on a beautiful, calm note. Keeping your eyes closed. And quickly just taking one quick check on how your breath is naturally moving right now. And as you see that breath descend into your chest, guide it with kindness. It is what elevates your energy every single moment. Consider this gratitude for that in-breath that brings life and that out-breath that takes away things that we no longer wish to hang on to. Today we meditate on how we manifest our courage to remain soft and kind on the inside, despite the hardship that life may throw our way time and time again. We meditate on our clear understanding that this lifetime and all of its offerings, experiences, are an illusion. They are a temporary phase in our soul's long journey through many life forms. And in this phase, we have a role to play. Knowing of this impermanence of this phase in your journey or the journey of your soul helps us distance ourselves from what is happening so we may approach life with observation of ourselves and of others in their own roles. It helps us understand who we are and who others are, even those we do not know. And think about that one facial expression that when given to another exudes acceptance and joy. Our smile. It exudes our understanding. It exudes our empathy. It exudes our forgiveness, our acceptance. So with a gentle smile, let's emit that power and goodness back into the universe and let this week be the past. Smile if you had felt lost this week. Perhaps somebody else needed to win. Smile if you lost something this week. Maybe someone who was destined for that win found it. Smile if someone broke your heart this week. Perhaps someone has to break for another to mend. And if that hurt still resides within you, know that you can share that hurt and still smile. Smile if you look around and you wished that your circumstances were different this past week. It would have been so much better if someone or something had been different. And then think about how that circumstance might even have been worse. There is a blessing in everything, one way or the other. Smile if there's a roof over your head, a shirt on your back, and food in your plate. If there's extra, smile and share with others. Smile, and if someone asks you, what did you learn in life, or maybe just this week? Reply that life has taught you to smile. As you end this journey, even if you have walked miles and miles, even if your glass feels half empty, know that your smile can fill the other half if you choose. Be the reed.